Welcome to March Malcontent, Episode 7. For this first match, we're going to have Squirtle against Ness. And it looks like we're going to be on Umbra Clock Tower. I guess you can use the clock to figure out what time I'm recording this at, not that that's very useful for you. Instant switch, well not instant, but very quick switch into Ivysaur. Not that it worked out super well, but it's at least an attempt. Now, Squirtle should actually be looking at a switch into Charizard just to avoid death. That is kind of the general flow of the Pokemon Trainer. You want to coordinate your Pokemon to what percentage you and or your opponent is at. Charizard, of course, being the biggest and heaviest, has a whole bunch of kill power and survives the longest. Ness actually beats out Ivysaur's upwards options with his down air. Pretty hard to do. Squirtle turns to Charizard and Flare Blitzes into the stage. That's just some extra free damage that Ness isn't going to have to inflict. A forward tilt of all the options. Up throw probably could have killed. The smash attack probably could have killed as well, although with the smash attacks they always come out a little bit slower, so there's always the option of it not connecting. Ivysaur with a very ambitious up smash, not going to connect, and he gets a parry on one of Ness's down tilts. That's something that the amiibo tends to be really great at, not specifically getting a parry on one of Ness's down tilts, but in general, you'll see moves like, for example, Ness's down tilt, get used a lot because it's very difficult for a human to react to it. Mostly in that, yeah, sometimes you can anticipate the first one coming out, but if you get hit by the first one, then you can get hit by up to 4 or maybe even 12 more, and it's really hard to tell exactly how many the opponent's going to go for. The effect is, of course, even more extreme if you're playing online. With just that little bit of lag, it means that even if you can react in time, it doesn't mean that your input will get processed in time. Squirtle makes it back to the stage, but he gets footstooled, does not switch to another Pokemon that could have increased his recovery range. That's gonna cost him that stock. He was at a high percent, so it's not a game-losing stock, but he is also a stock behind Ness, which is a problem for Squirtle fans. Charizard really not getting any moves to land. Usually the start of the downfall. Charizard finally gets a move to connect, gets Ness off stage, but Ness air dodges through the forward air, so he's able to recover without much difficulty. Avoiding the Ness ledge trap yo-yo tech. So for anybody watching, usually a Ness will go to the edge and use the yo-yo. It's two of his smash attacks though, it's his up smash and his down smash. Usually they go for the down smash, although I guess you can try to do it for either. And in retrospect it doesn't particularly matter because the yo-yo will hold itself beyond the ledge and that'll make it very difficult to recover. Ness won that match. That means that he is not eliminated from the tournament. And for this next match, we're going to have Baytwotta against Lucario. Although it's technically Baytwotta. Yeah, technicalities like that we've never been super great with here. If anything, in the last match, you could actually hear that I'd often refer to Squirtle as whatever Pokemon he currently was. The idea being that if anybody tuned into a random part of the video, they would be less confused. Although I suppose they always could check out the naming at the bottom of the screen. Underneath each character's icon, of course. But I'm sure there's some people who don't think to do that. Lucario almost getting swept off screen. He does only get hit with Baytotta's triple forward air combo. She does have a lot of combos at her disposal. Great way to rack up damage. Although in this matchup particularly, that might be a problem because Lucario is a Pokemon who actually gets stronger when he's at a higher damage. So against someone like Baytwotta, who's great at tacking on the earlier damage and just sort of winging it for the kill department, it can be pretty rough when you're against a Pokemon who, well, a player, I guess, but he is also a Pokemon, who is kind of built to thrive in that circumstance. That being said, this is a smaller stage than you're probably gonna see for the entirety of the tournament, I think. Even when the camera zooms out there, it looks larger, but it really isn't as roomy as you might think. The side blast stones are pretty close, especially compared to how far away the ledges can go. The stage isn't even that wide, so you can traverse it in a second or two at the most, usually. It, of course, depends on your character and what kind of speed you're working with. It actually gets pretty chaotic if you're ever playing in a 4-player Smash Brothers game. Specifically because there's even less room, even though there are platforms to help make up for it. Of course, if you are playing with 4 players, then you normally get to play the mini-games that give out helpful buffs if you complete them. Baytwotta gets her recovery to the ledge stuffed out. She is able to make it back. Always a question with certain amiibo. Also for Baytwotta, for some players. Another thing about it, Lucario's up special is also something that has killed many a Lucario player. The general advice I have for that is that the move gives you less steering control the longer it goes on. So if you just recover in a straight line, you're usually fine. It's when you try to curve it and then redirect the curve that you start to have problems. Lucario gets a random up smash in the middle of Baytotta's pressure. Baytwotta goes for an up smash there. Probably should have gone for the down smash because if it hit, it would spike Lucario, possibly killing him. Of course, it would have had to directly place him into the blast zone. Lucario does have a wall cling, not just a wall jump. Kind of like Baytwotta, actually. So that if it didn't immediately send him off the edge, he almost certainly would have been able to recover. Lucario now at high aura. Baytwotta, I should say, to be more accurate, needs to get a kill quick. That move almost killed her. I am not kidding. That's how small this stage is. Forward smash is going to kill Lucario. That was actually an important kill because it put Baytwotta out of lethal range for a bit. She does have some damage to make up. Only going for the 2 hits of the forward air. Didn't try to follow it up with anything sneaky or clever. She's doing a great job of manhandling Lucario, though. Although Lucario is sort of the comeback king, so you always need to watch out. It's not good enough to just be winning. You have to also not lose in the process. Which sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but it is true. Both players jockeying around, trying to fight. Lucario charges up an Aura Sphere. Throwing out these smash attacks, those actually could prove a problem for Baytwotta if she gets hit by one. Like that. Baytwotta is not going to be in the tournament. Lucario, we're going to have to wait and see. And here we have Mr. Game & Watch against Ken. 2 characters both fighting to stay relevant this tournament season. Though I guess that has been everybody in the tournament so far. In fact, anybody in the tournament ever. But this is the no backing out, the end of the line match where if you lose, you're not a part of it anymore. So I guess it would really only mess over anyone who decided to do illegal sports betting on this, which I really hope no one ever does. Especially because gambling's become a huge problem lately, and sorry to say, but it looks like video games are part of the problem. Funny enough, though, not any of the Nintendo games. It's Minecraft and anything with a loot box or a pay real money RNG mechanic. It is also actually interesting because any game that has an arcade in it, which would usually be like an RPG of some sort. You go around, defeat a whole bunch of guys, pick up gold, get ancient ancestral weapons and the like. and then you enter a place and there's a gambling minigame that doesn't require real money, mind you, you quickly realize that it's just not worth your time. Either it's faster to get the money you want through more safe methods, so then they try to encourage you to actually engage with the mechanic by giving it some sort of unique prize that can only be won with arcade dollars. And the prizes usually suck. I just gotta say it. In Pokemon games, they'll sometimes give you a unique Pokemon, so you have to do it for that. But then the solution is to merely farm up enough in-game currency and then convert it all through arcade dollars through the slot machine. I don't know, in Super Paper Mario in specific, there's an item that makes your character stronger for the rest of the game, which is a pretty nice item to have. But you have to play the arcade for what feels like 30 hours. So it's suddenly not particularly worth it. Obviously, it's a great memento if you actually did play the arcade for that long. And to be fair, in that game specifically, you can unlock a minigame that lets you effectively earn arcade money faster. But again, the total prize is slightly increased attack power, and it's also a platformer game. So, unlike the other Paper Mario games where you're an RPG which dictates how much damage you deal per turn, since it's a platformer, you can just avoid getting hit and then jump on the enemies just a little bit more. Especially since you do get some attack ups naturally through leveling, so it becomes even less of a requirement. Ken with a very sneaky up smash, actually managing to evade the Game & Watch up air. That is something the amiibo always seem to struggle with. Maybe it's because it's a projectile that travels upwards and most other programming is probably dedicated towards sideways traveling projectiles, because that's the way most projectiles travel in this game, because that's when they're most effective. And that's an early death for Ken. That's really going to set him back. Very high Shoryuken, barely avoiding getting punished for it. He does get hit by a Mr. Game & Watch Judge Hammer. I believe Game & Watch rolled a 1 on that, which is good for Ken, because if he rolled a 9, that could have been death. I have seen people claim that the Game & Watch 9 is an instant kill, or more accurate, they call it a one-hit KO move, which is not entirely inaccurate, but it's kind of a misnomer. In Smash Brothers, there really aren't any one-hit KO moves, or any instant kill moves, or guaranteed kill moves. There are definitely certain moves that, when they hit, are incredibly likely to KO the opponent in one hit. But it's never guaranteed due to the nature of the game. For example, Mr. Game & Watch's hammer is one of them. That, yes, it is strong, and it does launch you very far, even if you're at 0%. But if he hits it the wrong way on the screen, then it usually doesn't guarantee your death. Oh, but the key is going to guarantee Ken's death, which means that Mr. Game & Watch is permitted to fight another day. Over here, we've got Stever against Richter. I know I'm already bucking the conventions I set with Baytwotta earlier in this video, but I said it that way to point out that Stever and Richter both imply that each contestant is, respectively, more Steve or more Richt than another contestant. So that's funny. Even if one of the names is created by me, it's at least a short joke that maybe gave you some extra mirth in your life for an extra 10 seconds. Stever just automatically spawned the crafting table. That is something I'd like to point out, that you can destroy the crafting table, but it will keep respawning. However, it does cost Steve a material every time you do. Usually in a normal match, you don't prioritize killing the crafting table over punching Steve in the face, for the simple reason that if you do, then Steve is just going to mine more resources. Kind of doesn't make sense to go through a lot of work to make him lose one when he can get like 3 resources per second if you give him enough time to breathe. Although Richter's forward tilt already heavily damaged that crafting table, Stever tried to manually respawn it. He did craft his tools, it looks like. so his attacks will be slightly stronger, but he is also very low on resources. He has no iron, he's going to have to recover with the elytra. He does manage to kind of do a little sine wave to get back to the stage. And right there, he actually respawned the crafting table into the abyss. Something to know is that, and there again, that's actually costing him a significant amount of wood, which is a resource that is slightly better than dirt, I gotta say. It is something to know, though, that if Steve's dead, you can always kill his crafting table to get that resource disadvantage going. And then sometimes, like there, if he's off stage, he just keeps losing more and more. It actually can be a problem on custom stages. Sometimes people will make a custom stage that just does not have much walkable floor, which means that Steve is constantly respawning his crafting table into the abyss, which effectively means he doesn't get resources after his first stock and a half, or what have you. Now, Richter's going for an interesting style where he puts Steve off stage and then tries to edgeguard him. This is especially interesting because the Belmonts have notoriously very high-performing ledge traps, which I guess is probably a confusing term for some of you. Edgeguarding is when you go off stage to stop your opponent from grabbing the edge. Ledge trapping is when you're on stage and trying to stop your opponent from getting on it themselves. I guess the terms are slightly confusing, but we don't have really any better alternatives, at least that anybody's used. Also, you can switch the terms edge and ledge between them, so if you call it edge trapping or ledge trapping, people are still going to get what you're trying to say. I suppose the easy way to think about it is that if you say trapping, then you're on the stage trying to make your opponent's life miserable for getting on it. If you're guarding, then you're actually going out there to stop them yourselves. But it does get even more complicated because some characters like Min Min or even Richter, who we have in this match, if you haven't been watching for the last 2 minutes, can actually hit the opponent off stage while they are on stage because their range is that far. It is quite honestly something people forget about, especially Simon and Richter a lot, is that if they go high for whatever reason when trying to recover, you can just jump and forward air them. And you don't even have to fall off the stage. Normally, because of the Belmont's poor recovery, they shouldn't be doing that sort of thing. But if you're close enough to the stage, they can without any real consequence. Richter doing a great job of destroying that crafting table, pretty much by accident this whole game. Steve does have a lot of iron built up, but he also has to chew through 2 of Richter's stocks. And that footstool is going to secure the game for Richter. That means Richter may or may not make it on, depending on if he wins the next couple of games, but Stever's out. And now we have Dark Pit against Sheik. Looks like we're going to be on green greens. And it's not a battlefield version, so this is actually going to be the stage. Now, hazards are off, so you're not going to see any blocks spawning. It does, at the very least, though, provide an interesting platform layout. On most stages, you wouldn't normally have a hole in the middle of them. Although with the glaring exception being Bridge of Eldin whenever it gets blown up. It is actually interesting to see how certain final smashes have to be accommodated for any hole at the bottom of the screen existing. Sheik getting a lot of hits in on Dark Pit, although she's still at a percentage deficit. Certain final smashes, such as Ike's Great Ether, which is probably the most notable one, that and Olimar's End of Day, they rise up and then smash into the ground cinematically. The problem, of course, being that if there's no ground, they would just fall off into the bottom of the screen. And I'm pretty sure ever since Brawl, when the stage builder and final smashes were both introduced, it was possible to create a custom stage with a hole in the middle specifically to kill those characters when they use their final smash. Yeah, that doesn't really happen much on this stage, though, now that I'm looking at the whole layout. Dark Pit using his excellent recovery to not die, always an advisable decision. almost gets stuck underneath the ledge, but not quite. Sheik using a down air at a disadvantage. I generally can't recommend that, specifically because it's pretty predictable and punishable. In the change from Smash 4 to Smash Ultimate, almost every move in the game got its landing lag reduced, which does kind of help for the speed of the game. The main exception, if you can call it that, is that any move that propels the user downwards got a much less significant reduction in landing lag. Some of them probably didn't even get any. I, of course, didn't research every single move's frame data change between the two games. That's a bit excessive for my tastes. But when the game was first getting revealed, that was some of the few things we could actually try at the Best Buy demos, or what have you. The general design, of course, there being that if a move propels you into the ground, you don't want it to be easily spammable. Which I'm sure somebody would find a way to do. Great spike by Dark Pit that's going to get rid of Sheik's second stock, putting Sheik at a very poor situation. Although I guess whenever you take somebody's stock, they're never in a better situation than they were previously. Sheik with a very cool looking air dodge to get onto the platform slightly faster. Didn't accomplish much, but the spectacle was at least there. Sheik now trying to figure out a way how to land. Especially interesting because on this stage you have more landing options than on other stages just because of all the platforms you have. Dark Pit manages to recover. He has multiple mid-air jumps. In fact, he actually strictly meets that qualification. You have the grounded jump, and then he gets 2 double jumps. That seems to be the general trend for a lot of characters with wings. Which is weird to say, because they should get infinite, or at least maybe like Meta Knight, who gets like 5. But a lot of characters just get the standard double jump, and then 1 extra. And in true Smash Bros. Fashion, each extra mid-air jump is slightly less effective than the last. Not entirely sure on the reasoning behind that. I'm not exactly questioning the decision, but the reason does not currently make itself obvious to me. Dark Pit. Okay, so right there when he recovered, if he had tried to go straight up to hit the left ledge, he probably would have hit the stage. So by angling it sharply to the right, that was somewhere near the actual limit of how far you can angle it. Oh, she gets sent off stage. Air dodges back to the ledge. And Dark Pit misses it. That is a weakness to his recovery. It covers a great distance. But if you do it too close to the ledge, he simply won't grab the ledge. Gotta give these characters weaknesses somewhere. Sheik gets Dark Pit off stage, looking to take her first stock. Unable to do so. It is a character weakness of Sheik as a whole that fantastic combos, difficult time killing. It does actually mean that Sheik's a little bit better than most other characters, I'd say, in an item format, simply because so many items provide so many different kill avenues. A lot of them do also absolutely rack on the percentage, but with Sheik's speed, she normally doesn't struggle to pick up the items.
Looks like I'm the last man standing.
And here we have Ike against Corrin. Alright, starting off... Okay, so Corrin jumped on the platform and used a down air. I normally wouldn't recommend that, but Ike conveniently ran directly into it, so it actually hit. Interesting play, but it worked. Corrin almost getting Ike off stage. Not getting scooped by the Ike recovery, though. That happens quite a lot in these amiibo tournaments. There was one year in particular when I believe... Oh, Ike got hit by that forward smash. Anyways, there was the Chrom amiibo who got about 2 matches farther than he normally should have, specifically because whenever he was losing, he kept accidentally killing the opponent with his recovery. Those were good times. Those are the times we watch for. Well, I assume that you guys watch for. I'm making them, so I make them no matter what times we get. And I'm assuming you guys are watching. I guess if you're watching this video, it's not necessarily a requirement that you watched any of the previous years. And it's not even something I can particularly endorse. Obviously, if you want more of this content, feel free to watch it. I have definitely gotten better over the years at doing this, though. For reference, when we first started, I was recording this all on my phone because I didn't have a capture card. And I didn't have any sort of stand or anything too, so I kind of just had to point it at the monitor. Uploaded one match at a time. Yeah, I don't particularly blame people for not watching those. If anyone were to want to watch it, I did upload a compilation of all the 2020 Amiibo fights. It's, again, straight up a compilation on YouTube. It's like an hour long, so you can watch them all in a sitting if you want. It is, of course, an hour long because we had fewer Amiibo back then. Well, I had fewer Amiibo back then. We had fewer entrants in the tournament. So we effectively just matched them all against each other once. We didn't even need a preseason because we didn't particularly need to weed anybody out. In fact, I think for a little bit the tournament bracket kind of perfectly conformed to not needing to give anybody any sort of bye. Yeah, those were fun times, but the production quality has definitely gotten much better. Something that does help is that I get a year between recording these April Angers, which means anything that needs to be fixed has, well, I'd say a little bit less than a year actually, because we normally end in May, or sometimes June if I'm running super late. And then we start again in March. Although I do get things behind the scenes getting ready in about February. So that does leave 7 or 8 months when I can, for example, get better hardware. I have a much better microphone now than I used to. This year I actually got a nice microphone cover, which mainly means I spend less time editing out all the little mlems and the little lip smacks, which, depending on how much attention I'm paying to the audio right now, you might not hear any of those because I instinctively edited them all out. Or if they just sounded terrible. Anyways, in the early years, I had to spend a lot of time per video editing out all those audio ticks. And there is still some I do edit out, especially whenever I either lose train of thought mid-sentence, leaving an awkward stint of audio that accomplishes nothing. The other thing that I'll normally edit out is whenever I have to double take something, which is usually I said a word wrong or unintelligibly. Ike actually managing to take back the stock lead. That's great for Ike fans, I guess not great for Corrin fans. Although Ike still is at a high enough percent he could die. Even right here, he does side special recovery back to the stage. Something to watch out for, though, when you're Ike, is that you can side special recovery to the stage, but your opponent can stop you with their body. No joke, they can jump in the way of your recovery, you will smack into them, you have to cancel it into your up special immediately, because if you don't, you go into free fall. And since they threw their body at you, chances are you are not within grabbing distance of the ledge. It does also have a good chance of killing the opponent with you, but if they ever get a stock lead on you, it's very valuable for them to go for. Even though it does cost them some percentage, it usually costs you your stock. Footstool? Ike's able to recover. If the platform had started moving up about 4 seconds earlier, he might not have been able to grab the ledge. Both characters recovering. Ike does get some armor on his recovery. I'm not sure if it's heavy armor or super armor. It's changed between the games. In general, though, in Smash Ultimate, there are pretty few instances of super armor. Super armor mostly just being armor that has no limit. Usually whenever any character has armor, you can break it with giving them enough percentage or giving them enough knockback. And Forward Smash is going to take Ike's stock, but Corrin is starting to look at death range of the blast zone. And if that didn't make sense, it would be because Ike smacks her in the face with his sword. Interesting fact about Ike, that's a two-handed sword, but Ike's strong enough he uses it with one hand. Back when Brawl came out, that was one of the coolest things ever, and it's still impressive. Obviously, this being a video game character, they can just decide it to be whatever they want it to be. Kind of like whenever in a comic book, someone will say, oh, this is a 38 million pound brick, and then Superman will lift it. Well, turns out that artists have never been great at math anyway, so they just did whatever sounds cool.
Your skills were remarkable.
And now we have Meta Knight against Zero Suit Samus. Alright, looks like we're going to be on Final Destination. Possibly to Zero Suit Samus's slight disadvantage because she can chain up airs through platforms. Meta Knight, with all of his double jumps, actually doesn't need platforms to chain his up airs, or down airs, or sometimes whatever aerial he's just feeling that day. I'll tell you what, each year it feels like it takes slightly less time to record these videos. I mean, I'm sure there's something to be said about how as you get older time seems to flow faster, but I specifically mean that the specific hourly requirement, that's not going to kill Meta Knight, but Zero Suit Samus at least grabs the ledge. The specific time requirement of how long each episode took, I've always stuck with the 8-episode format, except for once or twice when I've forgotten how many episodes I've recorded so far. That it takes less time overall for every 8 episodes. Part of that I can of course attribute to the time between matches. I'm sure is a little bit lower. I've got a little bit more efficient with everything, so I need to double check fewer things between matches, and most of the time is actually spent registering the amiibo into Smash Brothers, and of course deregistering the old amiibo. It's not very interesting. You just kind of scan them into the controller, but you have to do it for all of them, otherwise the game gets mad at you. So that may have gone slightly faster, but I think that the biggest cause is probably that every match has, on average, gone a little bit shorter each year. And I can only assume that's because the amiibo have actually figured out how to kill each other. We have had some matches where the amiibo just can't seem to finish the job. And I think with fewer of those, the average video recording length has gone down. And if you actually look at the YouTube stats on all the videos, which is harder for, I guess, all of you guys to do because you don't get the YouTube Creator application? No, it's the YouTube Creator Suite, Creative Suite. I guess that's what I'd call it. Anyways, it lets me look at any video I've ever published, and one of the details you can see is how long each video went. You guys would have to just look it up manually. So the video time on those has gone down as well, if slightly less than the actual recording time. Zero Suit Samus still doesn't seem to know to B-reverse her recovery to face the ledge. When you don't do that, it makes it more difficult to recover, because you keep missing the ledge because, well, in effect, the game's programmed for you to try to grab ledges you're facing. It's weirdly important on Zero Suit Samus, however, specifically because that's how she gets most of her kills. I think I said it in a previous video, but in last year's retraining, I started to reach the limit of the AI being unable to perform beyond its programming capabilities. Mostly in that Zero Suit Samus needs a little bit more specific coding and/or combos in order to function. And we've sort of hit the theoretical limit. I mean, you can obviously tell now she's 100% behind Meta Knight and 2 stocks, so I kind of don't think she's winning this one. Maybe she'll pull something out of nowhere, and I will say to her credit, she's at least doing a lot better than she was last year. But better than terrible is possibly still not good enough. Well, probably. I don't know how long this last life is going to go, but Zero Suit Samus is kind of struggling to get the kill. And by kind of, I mean extremely. And she gets footstooled, so that's that. We will not be seeing her this year. Probably in the postseason, though. Hope she doesn't need to get retrained 2 years in a row. 'Cause that took forever. And for the last match of the video, we're going to have young Link against me, Gunner. Two very projectile-heavy characters. Going to be interesting to see how this match goes. I cannot, for the life of me, remember if I gave me, Gunner, the reflector on the down special or not. We'll probably see shortly the AI is at least pretty good at knowing how to reflect things and actually doing it. And that will actually make a large difference in this match. It is also interesting because on any me character you're playing who has an option for a reflector, if you're, for example, playing random people online where you don't know what you're going up against, it's usually worth it to just, especially if you don't have any other reason to otherwise, give the character the reflector anyway, just because it really does help in a lot of the spammiest of matchups. In that there are a lot of people who do not know how to play the game, but they know how to throw projectiles when it is to their benefit and it is, oh, there is the reflector, and effectively risk-free. You can, of course, break through that kind of play style. However, it can be either hard, long, or frustrating, sometimes multiple of those, simply because of how good certain people have gotten at avoiding playing the game, which is weird to say. Especially because it's not as if using projectiles is not playing the game, but in any competitive game, or even non-competitive game, there will always be a subset of people who seem to, I'd call them the risk-averse. They will take actions that benefit them, but they will not take any action that has any sort of risk to it. Which I do suppose makes sense. But that's where you get the people who, for example, play snipers in shooter games, or in Smash Brothers, they play an incredibly projectile campy play style. They, even if the reward is very marginal, they still see it as a risk-free play that has a slight chance of getting them a reward, so they will only do that. Again, I can't say it's optimal, but it is something a lot of people seem to gravitate towards for some reason. And of course, it's mainly a problem because it's infuriating for everybody else. Imagine if you're playing checkers with somebody and they only want to use the special rule you guys have that randomly rearranges the pieces on the board. I played with a guy once who only ever picked hero and tried to pick the kamikaze spell. I think he'd also settle for magic burst, but effectively he'd sit in a corner until he got the really, really good spell, and then use that to maybe to inconvenience people. Of course, using kamikaze that often usually meant that he died, and even when he'd use magic burst, that would deplete all of his mana, which left him rather defenseless, especially if you were able to throw him off stage. So he was not very effective, but he was, in a 4 or 5 player free-for-all match, effectively doing what he could to prevent anybody from playing the game. Which also kind of felt insulting, I gotta say. Especially since we had specifically invited him. He felt left out for not being specifically invited. It was weird. We were roommates. He came in, saw that we were playing a game, and then he just kind of went to his room, and one of my other roommates picked up on that he felt sad, so specifically invited him, hey, why don't you play with us? And then he pulled that. So it could have been a happy Hallmark moment, but instead we got, I don't want to play this game. Which is also weird because if he didn't want to play the game, he could have just said no. Or not acted sad. Oh, that up special actually killed Young Link. Things are looking a lot more achievable for me, Gunner. Anyways, back to sniping. Some players will just keep at a distance and throw out projectiles until the opponent dies. I actually had a very infuriating game with a banjo player of all characters who only wanted to run away. It was not pleasant, I gotta say. It was just a whole bunch of me chasing him down. I had some projectiles of my own, so it wasn't even that particularly beneficial to him. I wish I could tell you who had won more of the games. But I guess I'm not going to finish that thought because that's going to start the end of the video. Bye.